Hello, everybody.
Mayor.
Just gonna wait a
How you
few more
doing,
minutes.
Mr. Mayor?
Hey, good to see you. They wonder why we're waiting a few minutes for the rest of the folks to join. I just want to take a second and say thanks a lot for the help with the cards. You know, they came out great, and they're unique, and I really appreciate the hand with those.
Sure thing. I got good feedback too. Everybody I showed was like, "Ooh, they look very nice." So,
Oh, good.
same. Great.
Good,
I'm glad
thanks.
you like them.
I think Scott Pennell was also going to join us tonight. He's on midnights, but he was planning on joining us tonight. Well, I'd like to go ahead and get started. And first of all, I'd like to welcome Lisa and Kent. So glad you guys were interested in being members of council. And I know I speak for everyone when I say really glad you're with us tonight. And I want to ask, did everybody get copies of the questions that we'll be asking tonight?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So there's not a lot, and we had discussed probably alternating on who went first with the questions to make it fair. And we have 8 questions, and we'll see where they go. You know, some of these may need more of an answer than others, but I think everybody's ready to go. Lisa, I'd like to start with you with the first question. Why do you want to serve on city council?
I bought the house here 9 years ago, and I really love this town. And I think that we're at a place where there's a lot of transition. You know, when I first bought this town, we were in the middle of an economic depression. We didn't have as many tourists here. At least it didn't seem to me when I was here. And now we've got an explosion of tourists. We have really done an amazing job with updating Minor Street and Colorado Avenue. And I think that all the people that have discovered Idaho Springs, like that's not going to go away. And so that puts us in a place of transition. And I think that also means a lot of change. And I don't think change is a bad thing, but I think it can be a tough thing. And I think it takes a team effort to make that work better for the people that live and work here. And I'd like to be a part of that.
All right. Any follow-ups for Lisa?
Yeah, I do. You said you don't think change is a bad thing. Do you ever think that there's possibility that sometimes change can be a bad thing?
I do. I think you have to look at each thing that you're attempting to change or thinking about changing and weigh it on its individual merits. How is it going to affect the people that live here? How is it going to affect the people that work here and own businesses here? And then how is it going to affect the people that come to visit here? I would prefer to look at how does it affect the people that live here and work here first, but we can't ignore the fact that a lot of people come here.
All right. Anyone else? Ken, I'd like to ask you the same question. What is it that makes you want to serve on council?
That's a pretty similar answer to Lisa's. I really like this town. It's been really good to me, and I'm happy to give back. I grew up in a town, Fayetteville, Arkansas, that went through a pretty similar transformation to the one Idaho Springs is going through right now. A small mountain town that kind of exploded due to tourism and other things. It exploded in a good way, like being found and population and stuff. And then I also lived through a pretty similar experience in Golden a decade or so ago. And so, you know, I think I've seen this type of thing. I've seen it handled well and handled poorly, sometimes in the same town. And, you know, I'm happy to help out.
All right. Any follow-ups for Kent? And for you to lead us off on the second question, what qualifications and or life experience would you bring to this position?
I'm a Eagle Scout, so it's a while ago, but that never really leaves you. I have been on a variety of committees, never a city council, but other volunteer organizations for libraries and stuff like that. Been a business owner a few times, built a couple up from the ground, and that certainly requires working with folks, your employees, town government, quite a lot. Yeah, I have had a lot of experience just working with folks and finding consensus and, you know, thinking about other people's perspective, learning, you know, why do they have the opinion they have? Not even if it's different from mine, you know, you can usually learn something there. Yeah, that's me.
And I have a follow-up for you. Would you tell us about your business?
Sure. Yeah, my current one is a meadery, which is legally it's a winery. We make wine here in town. Use local ingredients. The manufacturing is at our house, which is all above board and permitted and all that stuff. It's a legal winery. We have a tasting room on Minor Street next door to Kind Mountain. We've got it's my wife and I, and we have 2 employees, about to bring on a 3rd. It's going really well so far.
All right, very good. Follow-ups for Kent? So I would ask you the same questions. What qualifications and or life experience would you bring to this position?
Like Kent, I've been a business owner most of my adult life. I was a certified massage therapist and ran my own practice for 16 years. And the last 7 years, I'm an author and I'm self-employed, and I don't have employees. I have people that I contract with. But it's a small community, and if you don't work well within your community, everyone knows. So you have to learn to get along with folks, whether you like it or not. But recently, I worked with Rocky Mountain Fiction Writers. That is one of the professional organizations for published authors. And I served on their executive board as the liaison for independently published authors. And then in the last year and a half, I've served on the Idaho Springs HPRC.
I have a follow-up for you just because a couple different times I had served on HPRC, and once in a while there would be something contentious, and we would have to resolve it. And I'm just wondering if you might shed some light on how you think that would help you on council.
Well, one of the things that I found on HPRC, we actually, according to the other members, because I've only been on it the last year and a half, this was a pretty busy year. We met almost every month. And we did have one recurring situation, certificate of appropriateness, that kept coming up. And it was pretty contentious because the board was evenly divided. Well, it wasn't evenly divided. It was split down the middle, 3-2 on how we ended up resolving it. And even that didn't end. And we just had to agree to disagree. You know, there was a lot of discussion over not only the Idaho Springs design standards, but also the Secretary of the Interior design standards. And it just came down to, here is why I believe this is what the standards are saying, and this is why I'm voting that way. And it wasn't personal. It was just a matter of, this is what I believe that the standards and the design guidelines are telling us. So I think you have to look at it. It's not personal. It's, you're trying to do the best for the people that are in front of you, not only and on the HPRC, not only for the person who's there seeking a COA, but also the people of the town who trust you to maintain the historic preservation aspect of the town.
Any follow-ups for Lisa? Lisa, I'd like you to lead off with this next question. What do you think is the most important responsibility for a council member?
There's a lot, but I think the most important thing is to be honest and ethical. You know, you're there to represent people that don't have necessarily the ability to be a voice at council. So your job is to be as honest and open and ethical as you can for those people that you represent.
All right. Follow-ups for Lisa? Ken, I would ask you the same question. What do you think is the most important responsibility for a council member?
Weigh the consequences of the decisions that you're making. As the end of the day, it seems to me that mostly you're making decisions on how things will be run, and it can be there can be unintended or unexpected consequences. So really thinking that stuff through and weighing heavily those decisions. I don't think I've ever seen a light decision at council. So really just taking it seriously. Your decisions impact people's lives in a really serious way.
All right, follow-ups for Kent? Kent, please provide us with 3 topics or items that council should address immediately.
Let's say the council should address immediately. The status of the quality of streets around. I know that things like that are very complicated, and I'm sure that it's on y'all's radar and you've talked about it plenty of times. Just the continuing priorities with tourists versus people who live here as renters and people who own houses. It's always an important thing to weigh. That's not a specific issue, but just maybe a almost a declaration of how to approach that balance. Maybe might be an issue to approach. And the third one, just childcare is enormous in the town and the county. Not just care, but things for kids and families to do. Those are the three just off the top of my head.
Can I have a follow-up for you? You talk about the balance, and let's look at maybe renters versus owners. And I'm just wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on the balance there.
Sure, and to be clear, I was saying balance between how you prioritize those decisions I was talking about and how they affect tourists versus residents. And I meant including, homeowners and renters, because things
Thank you.
affect people differently.
Thank you for that clarification. I'm sorry.
No worries.
Follow-ups for Kent? Lisa, it's harder to go second on this one, but
It is.
please provide us 3 topics or items that this council should address immediately.
This is one of my own personal things, having lived here now for a while. Definitely infrastructure. I have challenges for where I live that are based specifically on the infrastructure of the water and the sewage. I don't know if they're going to be the same because we had some repairs done later last year. I also think, and I'm basing this on some of the city council meetings that I've seen and just the recent vote, I think that city council has to find a way to get their wishes and their thought process out to the public more, because I look at the 2B that only failed by 2 votes, and that is going to have really devastating consequences, I think, for folks in the town. Like, I watch my water bill, and I'm sure I'm not the only one. And I think, just in speaking with my neighbors, I don't think that people understood what was at stake there necessarily. So that to me seems like maybe something that we need to do. And while my kiddos are older, I do think that childcare, I have to agree with Kent on this one. I do think that childcare is really difficult because everybody here works. We're going to a 4-day school week next year. What happens for those kiddos that are in school, will not be in school, but are not old enough to stay on their own? But I also, to tack onto that, I think that we have to have, other things for kids to do and people to do outside of just what is here available for tourists. And that might be more of a school board thing, but that's just my thoughts on that.
All right, follow-ups for Lisa?
Yeah, Lisa, you bring up, and so did you, Kurt, a good point. You keep on talking about the residents, which I think is important to all of us. Government, whether it be federal, local, or state, is a check and balances.
Mhm.
And the check should be by the residents of the city. And we get very little involvement. I believe prior city councils, the same thing. So I don't know that you have it's a very difficult question. I know I think about it a lot. I think the rest of the council does as well. But anything off the top of your head that might, from either one of you, might trigger some thought or idea that we can get more involvement, because you brought up the race, which was one of my pet peeves, and I'm not going to bore the rest of the guys with it like I have in the past.
I think I'm on the soapbox with you.
Pardon?
I think I'm on the soapbox with you.
No, you are. I think a lot of people who voted for it are as well. But my point is, if the residents get more involved, and if you look at our country as a whole, people don't get involved in any level of government like they should. But a small town like this, I think we should be more successful at that. So far, we have not. So I don't know that you guys either have an answer, but it's something to think about if either one of, which one of you get voted on to the council, that involvement from the residents would keep certain things in check and make us more accountable, which we should be. I think we are as much as we can be, but we don't know always what's on the minds of the residents. And I think that's an important thing for us to do going forward. So if you had any comments now, that'd be great. I know it's a difficult question. We've been wrestling with it, I'm sure the council after council for years, but it's something that needs to be changed. And I was glad to hear you talk about it. And I know Kurt's got the same interest.
I do actually. And, Jonathan is very good on this because I'm in a lot of the Idaho Springs discussion groups. And what I notice is that there's a lot of discussion. Now, granted, it's probably the same 30 people, but we're not a huge town. So those 30 people talk to 5 people a day. That's a lot of people that you're reaching just by word of mouth. I think, and I follow the city, the city council page and all of our pages, but where I see the most active discussion is in the community groups. I think if you had somebody that was a designated city voice, and had the city talking points, and like I said, Jonathan does a great job with this. Jonathan actually takes a lot of hostile fire on this one. I have to give him a lot of credit for that. That goes out and tries to explain, because I notice when he comes in and talks, he does get a lot of pushback, but there's more understanding. And I think that's where you have to reach people, particularly now during COVID, because everybody's doing everything online. And I think it needs to be something where you do like regular updates, because where I notice that people come is when they're angry, like the parking, the whole parking thing. That was like a year-long debate in the 2 groups that I follow regularly. The whole COVID response, the recent race, those were all ongoing debates that were online, and I only saw Jonathan in there. So I think maybe that needs to be one area where there is a dedicated presence. And it's not a criticism, it's just a critique.
No, that's what we're looking for. I appreciate that. We're very fortunate to have Jonathan and the staff we have, as the mayor has said before, Mike, and I know what Chuck feels the same way. We all do. They have the staff that we have at City Hall. So we're very fortunate in that way. No doubt at all. So, well, thank you.
And I can second what Lisa was saying there. What I've seen is some successful direct outreach that Jonathan and others have been doing. And so continuing that and increasing that, it seems, pretty ad hoc now. I mean, Jonathan and others do a great job with it, but one of the largest complaints seems to be people saying, y'all or other committees have been talking about an issue for months or longer. And then suddenly when it comes down to the day of the vote, suddenly people want to be involved, even though perhaps you've been begging for people to be involved before to get community thought. So more direct outreach like that. I mean, the website's pretty good. You can find everything you're going to be talking about, but you have to go look for it. And so direct outreach, I know it costs money, it costs people's time to do it. Perhaps even it's kind of infographics, or the state does a very good job of like, when there's a measure to be voted on, they'll say, here's what the people saying yes would describe it as, here's what the people saying no would describe it, here's a simple version of what this is going to do. Something like that would probably be enormous, especially like you said on the recent vote where a lot of people perhaps didn't understand it, so we could take some cues from the state. They do a pretty good job on those pamphlets, booklets that they send out.
Two excellent replies. Thank you. I'm sorry, Chuck, the mayor.
Oh, I was just going to ask if there were any further follow-ups for Lisa on that question. Lisa, if you would, kick us off on this next one. Probably the toughest one of the group. Should growth and change be accomplished in the city?
I'm sorry?
How should growth and change be accomplished in the city?
That is a really hard one. And I think it's difficult because, you know, we only have a certain amount of land, and there are a lot of demands on that land. One of the things that I've been following is seasonal workers, because I see posts all the time, like in the housing groups, looking for people who are seasonal workers. And I think that the county and the cities like Georgetown or Idaho Springs or Empire, they need to be a big part of how do we handle that, because I keep seeing comments about people don't want company towns. You know, they don't want the resorts or the rafters or the businesses to be the ones that are owning all of this. So I think that as a city, if we're going to have seasonal workers, we have to have, you know, a paddle in the river on how do we help accommodate those seasonal workers. It's hard because I think we're always going to be stymied by the fact that we don't have all the room for all the people that want to be here. You know, we're in a skinny little valley, so where do we go? We go up, and that's cost prohibitive. I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I looked to buy here, it was easier for us to buy in town than it was for us to buy up on a mountaintop somewhere and get our electric and our septic and our well. So, you know, we have to look for ways that can maybe do multifamily housing, but do it slowly. And slowly is relative too, because we still need workers every season. We need summer people, we need winter people. I don't know. I think this goes back to the idea that when Councilman Cavacala asked about change, you have to look at it as a case by case basis. You know, what's going to be the best for the town. I don't think there's a slow or a fast or a very definitive answer on that.
All right. Follow up, Lisa.
I do. You say multi-family housing. Are you talking about high in density?
I don't know about high in density, but you know, I look at the apartment buildings and I think those are good. They're only 3 stories, but I don't know if we can sustain anymore. Could we sustain an 8-family building? You know, is there a place where we could sustain 8 families in an apartment complex versus, I don't know how big the one down that was just finished down by the creek was. Is that 60? I don't know that we can sustain that necessarily. Any more of those. I don't know if we can sustain it from a wastewater perspective. You know, I know that weren't we operating at a fairly close to limit as far as our wastewater capabilities? I don't know.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any follow-ups for Lisa? And Ken, I would ask the same question. A tough one. How should growth and change be accomplished in the city?
With a vision and a plan, because any series of decisions that a council or any group makes without a vision and a plan of what they want the growth, where they want the growth to go, it will always be case by case and somewhat schizophrenic. That was one of the reasons I was really excited to see the new master plan and all the stuff in it, because that is a vision and a plan for the community. And so when you have things like that, core values that the community believes in, and a vision that you're trying to build towards, you can always look at back at that vision and say, okay, this specific decision in front of us, out of the options available, which one gets us closer towards our goal for this community? So when you've really outlined something like a master plan or other similar documents, you always have something to go back to. You know, when a really hard decision is in front of you, maybe the community's really split, you can look back to that type of plan together as a committee and or as a council and say, well, you know, option A fits our vision better, so maybe we should do that. And that's how I think you've got to approach big long-term projects like this. You can't foresee every single decision coming forwards, but you can say we're going to shape towards this goal, and each individual decision will try to, you know, choose the option that will get us a little bit towards that goal each time.
All right, follow-ups for Kent? And I'm going to have you lead us off with this next question. I'm going to apologize because I feel that both you and Lisa have already, to some extent, answered this question. When we had come up with the questions, obviously not knowing where your answers were going to lead us. But how would you go about getting the message out about city council hot topics?
Right. Well, as you said, kind of talked about this a moment ago, but I've already seen, personally, I think it's a wonderful start so far. The minutes and agendas are always available. You can go get them from the website. The whole packet is available. You get all the info before a meeting. These live broadcasts are wonderful. The amount of direct outreach that's been done so far has been great. And I would say double down on that direct outreach. Perhaps some tailored releases or booklets like I was talking about on specific issues. Yeah, just even more of the good job that's been done so far.
I have a
Different outlets,
follow-up.
I guess, beyond social media. Sorry to interrupt you.
Can I have a follow-up for you? John Kane has famously come to the rescue of truth more times than I could or he count. And I'm just want to ask, have you seen the city intervene perhaps on some kind of misinformation that was out?
Oh, absolutely. And especially with our current pandemic and other issues. But absolutely. One of the things is, we're a small town. We all know Jonathan works for the city. But I don't know, maybe it comes across a little differently when it's someone's personal account versus some official account making those types of comments and stuff. I mean, again, Jonathan, you rock. You do great work on that. I'm not saying you don't, but just ways to continue improve.
Any follow-ups for Kent? Lisa, I'm going to ask you the same question. Of course, how would you go about getting a message out about city council hot topics?
I think that Kent has a good point that it makes a difference when it comes from a personal account in this various social media realms versus a city account. And he has corrected misinformation, which is great. But I also think maybe we, as a council, you have to actually go out and talk to people. I know, with my neighbors, I go around and chit chat with my small group of neighbors. And I think that is one of the best ways to get information out. If you tell a couple of your neighbors, and we all know our neighbors who are the chatty Cathys, then they're going to spread the word about, oh, there's this topic. And I think that's how, just in watching the ebb and flow of city council meetings, both online and when they were still in person, you could tell when neighbors had been talking because the city council room would be full. If people had something they were really interested in or upset about or had a lot to say about. And I think that particularly because this is a small town, that might be, even though social media is great and I use it regularly, I think you have to actually go out and talk to people, because that's how you get them to show up. You explain to them what's happening, or you tell them what's happening, and they have a vested interest in it and they show up. I mean, I can remember being in some of the city council meetings where there was standing room only because people were so interested in whatever was going on.
All right, follow-ups for Lisa.
Lisa and Kurt, I should ask you, Ken, I should ask you the same thing. And we do have an aging community at a certain percentage as well. And they don't get involved in social media. So I think the door-to-door is an excellent idea. And so mine isn't a question so much, but to think whoever gets voted on to give us some thoughts and ideas on how reaching some of these older people, maybe by a newspaper or what, but not everybody is into that social media. And so I think we miss a certain segment, whether they're young or old. There's some people who just don't involve themselves in it. We miss a certain section of people, and it's important that we try to involve them as well. So I just thought I would add that to
Well, I would agree with you, because my parents are in their late 70s and they've got like 6 or 7 different devices where they can access social media, and they don't. They just don't. They don't use Facebook. It's a miracle that we text as much as we do. They just are not interested in that. So I think you have to meet people where they are. I mean, I know it's real, having worked on volunteer boards before, it's really frustrating when members don't want to show up or have a say until something goes awry. But you have to also meet people where they are. And if we have a segment of the community that is not on social media, then we have to go out and see them.
Okay. Kent, anything that I didn't follow up with you on this, but you have any ideas as well? I mean, on the aging part of our community?
Well, absolutely. That goes to kind of the phone tree, discussion tree type thing that Lisa was talking about. Also those state pamphlets that I was mentioning, you know, those are quite involved. It wouldn't have to be something that detailed. Even just a very simple mailer might be very effective to those folks, or might not. The most important thing, I think, is whatever's tried is doing investigations on how well it worked. Do we repeat it? Do we like, well, that was a neat idea, but it didn't work at all. Let's not do that anymore. So I think whatever's tried, a very important part will be following up on how well did it work, metrics, how do we improve it, not improve it, that type of thing.
All right, well, thank you both.
All right, any more follow-ups for Lisa on that question? Lisa, probably the easiest one and the last really. This one, Scott Pinnell asked me to ask. So do you believe that you have the time commitment for this position?
I'm sorry, my video glitched for a minute.
Oh, no trouble. Why do you believe that you have the time commitment to this position?
I'm very fortunate in that since I work for myself, my office is right upstairs, you know, so I don't have to go very far. And because I work for myself, I have the ability to give the time for it. And I think this is a great question because I really debated whether or not I was going to put a letter in, because I know it's a time commitment. You know, I watch the meetings and I can see the time commitment that is involved, but I do have the time, and that's why I went ahead and did it.
All right. Follow-ups for Lisa? And why do you believe that you have the time to commit to this position?
You know, it's a fun question for me to answer because I originally had intended to run in the initial election, and mostly because I was just worried that nobody would. But then, of course, Kate did, and that was wonderful. I did have full-time job as well as a couple of other commitments and my business at that time. So that was one of the reasons I pulled out, in addition to being, you know, happy that Kate was running. So wasn't worried about it going empty or a not cool person being there. But since then, you know, I am full-time on my small business now. So down to just one job, have quite a bit more free time than I did at the time. So
Follow-ups for Kent? Hey, that is the last of the questions. We're going to ask if you have any questions for us. I want to thank Kate Collier for submitting questions, and also Scott Pinnell. But we actually agreed on some of these questions, and they're kind of hybrids. But we didn't want you to go without making sure that we didn't inquire as if Ken, I'll start with you. Do you have any questions for us?
Sure. How has being on a city council changed how you think about cities or government or just life?
Kate?
I'd love to take this one. When I moved here to Idaho Springs in 2002 from Georgetown, I very much had that the city should do this attitude about almost everything. And I know it's very easy. It's very easy to be a citizen and a resident and blame what you don't really understand. So being on council was a huge eye opener. It was a very educational experience. Obviously, I liked it. I came back for more. So, you know, after 10 years wanting to serve again, I'm insane or just a glutton for absolute punishment. But I really can't recommend the job highly enough. I mean, it really does give you an insight into the government working on a local grassroots level, but even up into state and federal. So yeah, that's a great question, and you know, definitely whatever you can do to be working in locally is well deserved, is well earned, and very rewarding.
All right, anyone else?
Well, I agree with Kate. And you want to mark that one down, Kate? It's very challenging. It's very educational. And from my point of view, I see the city different than I saw it before. I see some of the people who are movers and shakers in the city and get things done and sometimes don't. So it's been very challenging, especially from my point of view about things as compared to some others. But it's rewarding. At the end of the day, it's rewarding, and it's very good feeling.
Hey, Ken, I also want to tell you something I was not expecting being on council. The admiration for you have for the other council members. I mean, even when they don't agree with you, the respect and admiration is really there. I can't explain it any better than that. I mean, unless you live through it, it's really hard to imagine. But I'm just saying this is a superior group. The issues are very well thought out, and I found it very gratifying, and it really changed me in the way I viewed small city government. And Lisa, I think we've got some time. I'd like to go back and forth, maybe just a couple times with this. But Lisa, do you have any questions for us?
Actually, Kent took a version of the question that I was going to ask. So I will say, what would you say that your time commitment is on a weekly basis that you devote to council matters? Nobody said
Anyone?
anything.
I think that's a variable depending on what's in the packet and what we discussed and what we know we're going to discuss in at the next work session or at the next regular council meeting. I think that's a flexible thing. Some of the other council members, and I can't, not myself, are on other committees and go to certain meetings that probably take up some of the time that I haven't involved myself in, which I probably should do. So I think it's a variable answer for each of us. But I think you have to study the agendas even after they're done, the votes that have taken place and what you can do to maybe make your point better in the next meeting on certain issues. So it's a matter of some homework and inner thoughts and that type of thing. And I know I have some people that I worked for back in the Midwest, and I go to them sometimes for advice and things like that. So I reach out for some people who are not here, who have been in a larger city government that help mentor me sometimes. And so I look for any avenues where I think I might be able to sharpen my skills.
Okay.
So Art's answer is 100% correct. It is going to be a variable. I will say, just to be perfectly clear, I'm going to make a push that we revert back to a process that we had when I was on council, where each of the council members are attending group meetings. Under Mike Hillman, he was really the guy that went to all the meetings, like the police, department, the planning. He did it all. So I am going to be, at least of myself, going to be asking that we're going to oversee some other meetings and become liaisons for those different entities within the town.
Yeah, it's all depends on how many communities are on. I attend about 3 or 4 different meetings a month, plus city council and workshops. So it all depends on how much you want to be involved.
Would anyone else like to weigh in? Ken, I'd like to go back to you and just ask, do you have any other questions for us?
Not particularly. Y'all have covered a lot of ground with the last two questions. I
Right.
appreciate your time a lot.
You bet. Lisa, do you have any further questions for us?
I do. I currently sit on the HPRC. If I am on council, am I able to sit on HPRC, or will that need to be vacated?
Oh, it would have to be, well, let me say, technically, we did weigh in on planning. You cannot sit on that board. I will tell you personally, I resigned from HPRC. I felt it was a conflict of interest where I sit as right judge and jury on HPRC, and I'm going to be make a recommendation to council on which I would also sit and make a decision on. So, you know, I hate to be wishy-washy, but we did not formally make the decision that you could not be on HPRC. I'm just telling you personally, I think that probably wouldn't pass the smell test.
No, I would agree with you. I just didn't know if it was a formal rule or not. I was not sure.
Yeah, and I'm being perfectly honest. It's not formal.
No, but you're right. It's on an ethical level. You know, it looks like too many fingers in the same pie.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, Lisa and Kent, thank you both very much. And but I just want to give an opportunity. If there's anything somebody wants to throw out before we thank Lisa and Kent for being with us, please feel free to go ahead and throw it out there.
Well, I wish there were more seats for both of you guys, because you both made great points, and we're going to be lucky to have either one of you. So that's just
Yeah.
my take on the conversation.
Well, I agree. Two excellent applicants. We couldn't be happier.
Thank you.
Okay, and Arthur, I couldn't say anything better. Thank you very much. And you know, also let me put in a plug in case folks are interested, because obviously both of you would be exceptional, just exceptional on council. We do have, well, unfortunately, I think it's frankly February 1st, we end up officially with 2 empty seats on HPRC. I believe we've got a planning vacancy, as well as, well, I know we do. I mean, Kate is a reason why we have a vacancy there. And I think we also have a variance. I think, you know, so there's a lot of other committees here within the city that definitely need help. If you're interested, should you not be selected, or if you know anyone that would like to be on these, please contact City Hall. But Kent and Lisa, thank you so much. You both, I don't mind telling you, you did a great job. And I know we were very impressed with both of you. So you guys have a good night.
Okay,
And
thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right, so I'm looking, and I have to say, I know we're all very happy with the way that turned out. A couple of fun applicants there. So now we have a chief and the tasers, and the report is pointing out that we did budget this, and we're looking at an item of about $6,480 a year being due February 2022. And Chief, I think you put out a very good reason why we need these.
Okay, I do have, Mayor, Council, I do have just a short 7 or 8 slide presentation that I can go over if you'd like me to. Just take 5 or 10 minutes and certainly answer any questions you might have.
Chief, great.
Okay, I'll see if I can get this shared here. Okay, so is everyone seeing the slideshow?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay. All right. So really, this came about. If I remember right, I think even Chief Malanka had said something to me when I met with him, sort of during that transition period when I came in and rode with him, that our tasers are ending their life cycle. So sort of like with most technologies, about 5 years is about what you get out of things, and so that's really where we are. So I'll just do very briefly. These tasers were developed in 1993, so they've been around a while. It looks like ISPD purchased them in 2016, so this was the first purchase of those devices. They do use 2 darts that are basically propelled into the skin, clothing of folks that are combative with officers and aggressive with officers or with the general public. So there's a lot of research about tasers. 2009, the Police Executive Research Forum found that larger agencies saw a 76% reduction in police injuries when they instituted having tasers. So there's also other studies from other police departments. This one demonstrates over here the 48% Seattle PD saw a reduction in suspect injuries in using those. Our taser, I did want to include, I felt it was important to include our data for council because someone might ask, how often do officers use tasers in Idaho Springs? In 2021, there were 3 deployments, is what the data shows. In 2020, there was 1 deployment, but here's the interesting point, there were 4 where the tasers were actually pointed at somebody, but the person then complied. So we were able to gain compliance without having to use the taser. And then back in 2019, it looks like there was 1 taser deployment, but there were 8 times that they were actually pointed at somebody. So that's one of the points of data that we really try to keep track of, because it's important to know whether or not it's used as a device that people say, look, I don't want to deal with what may happen. And that's what some of this other data on the screen here is from other agencies and other parts of the world that use this device. And the key to these devices, well, let me explain the upgrade. So this, if you can see this, the Taser 7 is what we'd like to move to. And you can see that the probes themselves are a little bit shorter and a little bit thicker, and they fly better, and they actually penetrate the clothing a little bit better, which is important when you live in the mountains and we have people that wear lots of jackets and sweatshirts and things like that. So, but what I really wanted to get to is this one here. This is the key to this piece of equipment. Like any piece of equipment, you don't just hand somebody a piece of equipment. You've got to make sure that everybody is trained, and which we do, and that they're following policy. So it's very important to understand that any use of force beyond standard handcuffing, a supervisor has to be notified. And not only that, if they do use force, they have to complete what's called a force data collection form. And that's another layer to make sure that everything is reviewed, all the body camera is reviewed, the reports are reviewed. And that way we make sure that if there's an issue, if something isn't done right, or it's not within policy, procedure, or the law, then it's obviously addressed and that we're doing the right thing. And that's really what it boils down to. We give officers handcuffs, we train them how to use those. We give officers a gun, we train them how to use that and when to use that. So it's the same, it's all along the same lines. But we are at a point where it's a piece of equipment that does need to be replaced. So the current tasers are 5 years old. The warranty is about to expire. The technology over a 5-year period is likely to improve again. It just does, just like with this iteration. And then one of the other things of note, we've talked about with council's support to send somebody to an academy, someone that is not certified. Well, one of the things that we discovered in our research, the academy that we're looking at is the Highlands Ranch Academy. It actually is the most cost effective, at about $7,500. So it was a little bit cheaper than what we had thought. They do require a Taser 7 for that academy. So they wouldn't accept us sponsoring somebody and sending them with the current Taser that our officers are issued, because they are going out of life cycle. So if I'm available for questions, and again, I appreciate council's support and understanding. This item was budgeted for this year, but I felt it was important to at least have the opportunity to present this to council. And if council had any questions about this, then I will do my best to answer those questions.
Hey, Chief, I'm kind of wondering, all you hear about these days is the supply chain and lag time. And I'm wondering, are they readily available?
From my understanding, yes, they are. I don't know exactly what that means as far as the length of time, but this iteration has been available for a couple of years now. So I'm under the impression that they are available and that they would be here in a fairly timely manner, just because of the liability and trying to keep departments caught up. When you talk about departments, giant departments, with 1,000 officers or 5,000 officers, they do have a supply, from what I understand.
Well, that's good to know. And, of course, you were already approved for an expenditure such as this. And I think we're all very confident you would not spend this willy-nilly. I'm sure this is a very good investment, and especially in light of challenges all law enforcement are facing. I think that this is a good idea, a very, very sound purchase for the police department.
How many tasers are you talking about? I didn't see it.
So I believe the bid is for 9 tasers. So I'd have to look at the actual contract, but it goes a little bit beyond that, in that they provide one of the things that this new model does provide is the ability to use it in a short range, that's the typical use, is a shorter range. So typically an officer will have the taser loaded with those 2 cartridges. There's actually 2. But if for some reason there was a situation where we kind of had a standoff and there was more distance that needed to be used, that's the other feature that this taser offers that our current tasers don't, which is that you can put a different cartridge in there and it allows it to be used at a much greater distance. So that's one of the other things that's part of this.
So each officer will get their own taser?
That's correct, sir.
Hey, Chief, I'm just curious. You watch old episodes of Cops and whatever, and it seems like, you got to be within like 10 feet of somebody. What kind of range do these new ones have? Are you like 40, 50 feet?
No, it's not quite that. It's not that great. The smaller range, I believe, is obviously very up close to about 10 to 15 feet. And then the other range, I believe, is about a maximum of 25 feet. So but
still pretty good.
Yeah.
Does this company give training, or do you have to do that?
What they do is they have train the trainers, and currently ISPD does not have anyone that's attended that train the trainer class. However, the Clear Creek County Sheriff's Department does have taser certified trainers, and they're very welcoming in helping us certify our officers every year using the tasers. And that includes not only use of force review and when you should use a taser or not use a taser, and specific circumstances, things you need to take into account, and our policy obviously reflects that as well. Tasing somebody that's higher up on a rooftop is not a good idea, or things are, a pregnant person, things like that. So the county provides that training for our officers, and then we document that through post, which is, peace officer certifications and standards.
All right, any more questions for Chief? Chief, thank you very much. I appreciate you bringing us up to speed on the taser purchase.
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council.
Next up, John Kane on a grant update, or grants plural update, even better.
Mayor and Council, there are a lot of funding opportunities that are available to the city in 2022. And Andy and I and Jared wanted to put together just a little report about some of the opportunities that are upcoming in the very near future. I've detailed all of them in my report. I'm happy to walk through them all if you'd like, Mayor, or if you'd like me just to answer questions about these opportunities, I can do that as well.
Well, I think because you are looking for guidance, it might be beneficial to at least spend some time on each one.
Okay.
So, you know, some of these are, Jonathan, I'm sorry, in my opinion, they're such low hanging fruit, they're just no brainers. But
For sure.
there's one or two that I think that you've already pointed out. But for the council's benefit, I think maybe we should spend at least a few minutes on each one.
There are a couple of these that I'm really excited about. The first is the first one I mentioned there, the Colorado Revitalizing Main Street grant opportunities. This is a grant that the city received money from in 2020, and we did a lot of projects in and around the downtown centered on mobility for bicycles and pedestrians in the downtown area. So there were some crosswalks that were done, some street signs, the new ones that you see throughout the downtown area, and some other work like that we did with $50,000 grant we got then. There are now two different tiers of this program. There's the $150,000 tier, which is for smaller projects. That's that small multimodal and economic resiliency project. And the city can actually apply for multiple versions of that. That's not out yet. And I think that we need to have a little bit more conversation about what projects we'd probably like to apply for out of that funding source. We were thinking about some of the near-term projects that were identified in the downtown master plan. There's also a larger infrastructure program that's available through that CDOT Revitalizing Main Street program. And we've been looking at that pretty strongly because it's $2 million, up to $2 million award. Jared and I attended a meeting with the CDOT folks, which has changed over a little bit. They are saying that they're expecting a very competitive grant round. So it may possibly be that we can only get $400,000 or $500,000, but the award amount goes to $2 million, and that's what they were giving last year. So that's certainly on the table. And we are recommending that we do apply for that program. Its application due date is February 4th. And we were thinking the Mobility Hub project is a really good one to look at through that funding source. Although certainly we could look at other ones that fit kind of the needs of the program, which are transportation related. The second tier of grants I have here are the Dolo Grants. That's the Department of Local Affairs. And typically we apply for a fund, which is called the Energy Mineral Impact Assistance Fund. Both of the grant opportunities that are listed there are through that fund. And what it does is it helps communities that are impacted by mining. The first one is the Best and Brightest program. As you know, I was a Best and Brightest. It's a graduate fellowship that brings somebody, typically an older graduate student into a city to get experience working in city administration while they're completing their graduate degree in public administration. Mine is in political science and public policy, but also public administration as well. So I was slightly different. But anyway, there is a new round of those fellowships available. We can submit a work plan for this program on February 1st. The way this grant is structured is that for year one, we pay $10,000 out of their $40,000 salary. Year two, we pay $20,000, and then year three, we pay $10,000. So essentially what we do is we get a 2-year full-time employee for $40,000 a year while they're just completing that grad work. And that person can be a capacity person at City Hall, or depending on their skill set, they may have other skills that are useful to the city once they come on board. We have written a draft work plan for that, and we'd just like direction on applying for that program. We did budget it for 2022. The other one is the Eiaf Fund, and there's 2 cycles of that. And it's really important to keep that in mind because the first cycle is between $200,000 and $600,000, depending on there's a lot, it's kind of a complicated system, but there's a tier 1 grant and a tier 2 grant. So that's kind of that tier 1, tier 2, 200,000 for the lower amount, 600,000 high end. And then in September, it goes up to 750 on the top end. We do have several projects we'd like to apply for using that funding source. Last year, we got funding for our public works facility that we'll be building. We would like to apply for the library landscape project in the spring. The reason for that, we had anticipated a cost for that project that was significantly less than what happened just with construction costs and all the different things that are happening in the world right now. This would give us a really good way to kind of finish that project, which is important to a lot of people in our community. And I think it's a good use of those funds. So we'd like to apply for that on March 1st. On September 1st, we have a little bit different project, another infrastructure project, one that's a little bit more invisible, up at the Madi Dam, which is at the water treatment facility. That's the dam that kind of holds water as it comes from the creek into the plant. So if you're familiar with where it is, it's on the, is that west side there, John? Yeah, the west side of the road. And that dam needs to be rebuilt just to make sure that our water facility is getting what it needs to have. We'd like to apply for that project in September. There are some other projects I identified that we have improvements that we can do with those funds as well. There may be other funding sources available for all of that. As you may know, there's a transportation bill that's coming through, which is bringing billions of dollars to Colorado. And also, you never know what we may come across this year. There's a lot of different funding projects that are just happening, but we think likely the best use of the funds is Madi Dam in September and library landscape this spring. The final there's two more here that I talked about. The next ones on my staff report are the EDA grants. That's the Economic Development Administration. There are two grants that the city is eligible for that are large scale money opportunities, both $10 million. The problem is one of them is January 31st, and this being a federal grant, would be a Herculean task for us to make it happen. The second grant, though, is very similar. It's the Economic Adjustment Grant, and it's for tourism-based economies that had different issues during COVID. We qualify for the parking structure, but there's also other funding or projects that might be eligible throughout the city. The parking structure would be a really great one because this is such a large pot of money. The application is due on March 31st. And as I said, there's a lot of administrative time and costs that goes into applying for a federal grant like this. One issue that we're kind of working through right now is what's called a Nepa review, which is the National Environmental Protection Agency review that happens in different areas if you're going to do large scale projects, especially related to the highway. We may have a NEPA project or a NEPA study already completed for where the parking structure would go, which would significantly increase our ability to apply for this grant and be successful at it. That grant is still a little ways away. It's March 31st. I put in there that we would really recommend applying for it if we can meet the requirements for the grant and all the things fit our project. It would give us a large bit of our grant gap funding for that parking structure if we were able to accomplish that. Federal grants are notoriously difficult and complex though, so we're still trying to work through some of those details. The final opportunity here is Great Outdoors Colorado. They have a new grant program. So everything at Great Outdoors Colorado changed just after we got our last grant award. Our last grant award went to go complete the first phase of trails at Virginia Canyon Mountain Park. That work is underway. There's well over a mile of trail that's already built and they will be open in May. So that's kind of a cool thing. What we are looking at is this community impact grant to see if we can build out the rest of our projects. We, of course, did receive another grant for this project from GOCO in 2018 to fund the initial master plan. GOCO has been a good partner to the city, as has CPW, as we worked through this project. And we worked on things like preserving the sheep habitat up there and making sure that if there's lambing occurring, that we're being conscientious about how we're building our trails, all that kind of thing. We've been working on this project with them for the entire time I've been with the city extensively. And I think we're ready to cross the finish line on funding the rest of the trails. We've talked to the new GOCO staff. This project is well aligned with what's called the state SCORP, which is basically the document that talks about how recreation should be occurring in the state. I think we have a pretty good opportunity to get funded through this program for the trails. It's a little bit of a weird application for this. So what we have to do is submit a letter, which essentially answers all the grant questions in the narrative to GOCO, but it's like a mini version. So it's only a couple of pages instead of 5 pages, like just a condensed version of our narrative there. That is due on February 21st. Yes, February 21st. So we have a little bit of time to work on that. And what we'd like to do is apply for this program. Of course, this is an interesting one because our concept paper for this has to be accepted. council would still have a decision to make whether we go ahead and apply for full funding, and if we do get full funding, whether or not we take it. This wouldn't commit us to anything putting this concept paper in, but would allow us to stay in the conversation for additional funding if the city finds it beneficial to us once we're completed with the project. One of the things about applying for this project right now that I think is really important is that we are already mobilized on the trail right now. We've already started construction. We would of course put out an RFP for this project, but for instance, if our trail construction company was selected, they could continue on into those new trails. Or if another company was selected, they could probably mobilize relatively quickly so that we could get that construction going this year, which would be ideal just to complete the project since we've been working on it for so long. That's what I have in here. There may be some other grant opportunities. As you may know, the transportation bill that I was just talking about has several grant opportunities in it. It's a little premature to talk about those. There's also some historic Colorado grants that we may be able to apply for instance, for the train or something like that. But again, we're just not quite in a place where we're ready to talk about that strategy yet. These are the most important ones for us to be thinking about right now, just from a terms of writing. I think if you have any questions about any of that or any other opportunities, I'm happy to answer.
I do.
Yes, sir.
Would this GOCO have any adjustment or any reflection or any thing with the Argo Mine Argo Mine agreement we have?
Yeah, and that's why I say that we have some inflection points for decisions coming up. Putting this concept paper in, we're not required to, our strategy for funding, we would talk about it in kind of a large scale sense, but depending on how other conditions in the city work out and policy decisions of council, we could continue if our concept paper is accepted into putting an application in. And of course, if we get the application and we don't want to fund, if we don't want to go forward with the money, we don't have to, but we would provide match and we would use our community partnerships to help leverage these funds to try to complete the trail system in all likelihood.
That's if our partnership comes through with the obligation, right?
Well, and the honest truth is there may be other funding opportunities for these trails too. And that's one of the things that makes 2022 a kind of complicated grant year, is we would want to use funding to match this grant that leverages the city the best from a strategic standpoint. And so, it's hard for me to say exactly what's going to happen tomorrow, but my goal would be to leverage as much free money into this project as humanly possible.
I agree. Okay. Thank you, Jonathan.
Hey,
John, can you just tell me exactly what the Build Back Better grant, that I can't remember which grant it was, but you were talking about the parking structure specifically, but would that also cover like local roads in Idaho Springs? Unfinished roads?
That's a good question. And this is a strategy thing that we need to talk about a little bit. The mobility hub, of course, includes improvements to make the mobility hub happen. Essentially what a mobility hub is it's a center of transportation, multimodal transportation for bikes, pedestrians, buses, the whole bit. As anyone knows who's been downtown by exit 240, sometimes bus traffic there can be a problem. So the intention would be to make buses be able to come into the city quickly and easily and not impact the operation of the city or residential life, that kind of thing. So there are improvements that are required to our infrastructure to do that. If we are able to get a funding opportunity like this, which is the American Rescue Plan Economic Adjustment, that's a $10 million grant. There's also the CDOT money, which is $2 million. The $2 million is probably gap funding, I'd imagine, for the parking structure, because that's our number one priority, is to build that structure, because everything else kind of comes out from there like spokes on a wheel. But I would imagine that if we can achieve a larger funding source, we would want to include some of those improvements. We did discuss with the CDOT grant as well, the larger one. One of the other opportunities is we could apply for some of the improvements around the parking structure. Idaho Mall and the parking lots to the east were both in the downtown master plan redesigned to be more efficient and to function better in that kind of arrangement. And so that would be the other opportunity we have, just depending on how everything shakes out, is that we could do those improvements with that funding and then look at this bigger funding source or a different funding source.
But I was specifically talking about roads in the residential areas, not so much in the commercial.
I don't. there's a nexus on these grant opportunities, but in the transportation bill, there are other grant opportunities that may be appropriate for that kind of work. But we don't have enough guidance from the Fed yet to know exactly how we can use those grants.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood your question.
No, it's okay. It's okay. My other question is just, is there any downside to applying for all these grants at the same time? Does it look bad for us? I mean, what does it generally look like? Just that we're poor as hell?
You know, sometimes it doesn't hurt to hold your hands out and say, help me, I'm poor. You know, like people want to help. And I think our community, especially, people know we're impacted by I-70 and have been historically impacted and what that's meant for our community. And I think that this is a really good time to say, hey, look at our issues, look at these systemic problems that have existed within our community for a long time. And we're willing to work within your system to fund these problems and address equity. And in this case, equity just means, you know, a reasonably fair distribution of resources. I-70 moves so many people, and we are a very important cog on that machine. And I think that people want to help us, and we just need to make sure that we fit within those programs and everything.
Eric, you want to add something?
Yes, so I think that applying for a lot of the grants, we can also indicate, especially when it comes to the parking structure, if we're applying for other grants, we can indicate to CDOT that, look, we're really working hard on making this happen and matching your funds and adding additional funds to make this an even better project. So I really don't think that going after some of these grants at the same time is necessarily a red flag to anyone. I think it's a sign of a community that's really looking to do a lot of projects and get a lot of its goals accomplished. Thank you.
One thing with the federal grant, though, that's the one thing I'd say is the EDA grant is subject to the federal funding requirements. And there's things like Davis-Bacon wages that need to be considered as we think about the whole cost of the project. And it's not a bad thing. It's just that funding source. That's why I kind of gave ourselves a little bit of wiggle room there, because we just need to fully understand the impact of that grant award on the city. All the other ones, I think, are slam dunk, and we have a really good shot of being competitive.
Hey guys, just so you know, what I really try to do is I asking for money from the federal government and the state government. I'm like, yay, please do it. But I just like to put an underline on it so that people that are watching the meetings understand and may have that question. They're not here to ask that question. So sometimes it sounds like it's from me, but I'm really kind of thinking outside the box and trying to bring you what other people might be thinking. Hopefully.
John?
Now that the marijuana excise tax passed used for parks and recs, the council had asked for a comprehensive study on the parks and recs. How are we doing on that?
That is a complicated, I'm going to just briefly to answer that question. Idaho Springs is part of Clear Creek Metropolitan Recreation District, which is a quasi-government, and they're tasked with recreation in the county. And we have worked with them in kind of the beginning phases of looking at all of our recreational opportunities. For us, of course, that's kind of a two-pronged approach because we have our recreational facilities and then there's recreational programming that occurs at the facilities. There's also things like our lease on the ball fields with the rec center and all that kind of thing that needs to be considered there. We have done a lot of the legwork to do that project. One of the things is that it probably makes sense to have a stakeholder group put together with some county stakeholders and the rec district, just because the work that they do, and we want to make sure we're not duplicating services. You know, there's some recreation facilities that we know we need in the city to be replaced. One is the tennis courts. That's something that we promised the community would be replaced. We also talked about basketball, and then, you know, we have some playground equipment that is probably nearing the end of its life cycle. We are going to have a very nice horseshoe pit pretty soon. That's coming along, and that's a great recreational facility. That also has some cross usage, like we can use it for some of the other kind of yard game kind of things that people play. And we do need to keep working on that project. It's just, we need to make sure we have the right people at the table. So we have been working on that. Another place that this is kind of a crossover is the skate park. Mountain Youth Network and the school district and the rec district have been working on that project too. And it's something that it's a very, it's a large group of people and complex issue. So I'm not trying to say we're not working on it. We have definitely spent a lot of time on it, and we need to identify the goals that City Council would like to have identified in that work as well.
So in the next couple of months, you might have a list.
Maybe, Andy, we could bring that to a work session to discuss.
Great. Thank you.
All right, any more questions for Jonathan? Well, thank you for that information, Jonathan. And I know it's not on the agenda, but did folks get the knowledge or the press release about the truck that drove into that triplex on Colorado Boulevard? Very, very unfortunate, and I'm glad that the chief is still here with us. But I had authorized an expenditure for these folks. There is a week that they're being put up in a hotel currently, and I would hope that we would entertain going longer, but at least for the first week, they're being put up in temporary housing. And I'm also going to ask the chief to describe, what happened for anyone who might have missed it. And there is a possibility of restitution, although chief says it probably, could be some time off, but we may get reimbursed yet for the hotel stays for these folks, but I really think it's the thing to do. Chief, if you would bring folks up to speed, perhaps that hadn't heard about this.
Sure, Mayor, Council. So it was on January 15th, just after midnight, there was a call that came in that a truck had run into a house along Colorado Boulevard, the 1500 block, and then had fled the area. And as the truck backed out of the house and back into the street, it did strike one vehicle, causing pretty good damage to that vehicle, and then drove off. So the officer arrived and checked for injuries. Fortunately, nobody in the residence was injured. There's three different apartments within this one structure. So there was a family that was there and was asleep when this happened, and they were just adjacent to where this happened. And so deputies started searching different areas of the county while the ISPD officer, the one on duty, stayed there and investigated, collected evidence at the scene, made sure that the residents and the fire department were okay. And the fire department said, hey, you guys can't stay here, obviously, because of the issues with the potential structural damage to the building. The Clear Creek County advocates responded, and they came out, the victims advocates, to basically help these folks get a room for that night, because it's in the middle of the night. At about 10:37 the next morning, the sheriff's department was called to an area near Empire, Colorado, and a gentleman wanted to report a vehicle as being stolen. The deputies were aware of what had happened in Idaho Springs, and they contacted the gentleman. The truck that was very damaged, and the deputies questioned the gentleman further, and he then confessed that no, it wasn't a stolen truck, that it was actually him that was driving. It was a 2020 truck with insurance. So our hope is that through a restitution process with the courts, that the city could be potentially reimbursed for assisting these folks. Of course, there's no guarantee there, but we would certainly be a party to that and ask for that. I do want to update council. As of now, I just found out this afternoon, we submitted all of the paperwork to the district attorney's office for the person that was involved in this. There were some things investigative wise that we wanted to do, including talking to some of our local establishments that serve alcohol to see if this person was potentially present in one of those places, and it appears that he was. However, actually proving a DUI charge is going to be rather difficult in the time lapse between when it happened and when he was contacted. So we did submit to the district attorney's office a recommendation for reckless driving, leaving the scene of an accident, failure to report to police, and then reckless endangerment because of what happened. So outside of that, I'll do a follow-up information on this person tomorrow. We would like the opportunity to go see if we can find this person tomorrow, since he'll have a warrant for his arrest. So that's where we are with the case at this point. But there was a lot of great teamwork with the sheriff's department, with the advocates, and obviously with the city and the mayor saying, hey, we'll try to help these folks out. So that's the short and sweet of what happened at this point. And from what I understand, I believe the city inspector, building inspector, did go take a look at the building today, and more to follow on that.
Thank you very much, Chief.
Thank you, Chief.
Yeah, Andy?
Chief, would you just describe what the arrangement was with the advocates as far as the housing and what might be the longer term possibilities there?
Sure. So what I understand is the victims advocates agreed to take on half of the cost for a week, and the city would take on the other half. So the advocates will take on that cost, and then they'll ask for half. I think that's fair. As far as so temporarily, so that gets into Monday. What the mayor's mentioning is that, is there anything we as a city may need to do for a few more weeks? And right now, one of the things that's complex is that this sort of incident isn't of what's called a VRA crime, a victim's rights crime, where it's a crime of violence. So it does sort of restrict what the advocates are able to do as far as helping these folks out long term or even short term. So they're able to help a little bit, but it does cause some more complications. And from what I understand, these folks all live and work in Idaho Springs, and I mean, they're residents here, and they live and work here. So I don't know if that answers the question or not, but right now it definitely complicates the issue because housing is so limited here.
Yeah. Yeah, and the inspector, I guess, was just out today. I saw I got photocopied a copy of the red tag saying that, it was unsafe to habitate due to severe structural damage. Thank you, Wonder, for providing me that copy. When Chief was saying stay tuned, I mean, I think we could all agree it'd be great if the structure could be repaired, at least, to make it livable in the short term. Wonder, you have some information?
I do.
Please.
The owner of said property has already reached out on what needs to be done, and they are interested in change. So do not know what that is. I told him he needed to get with Jared, first of all, if he's going to change anything. So I don't know what that means.
Okay. All right. Andy?
Wonder also, the building official said that a report would be issued, an assessment would be issued shortly. Is that right?
They said, well, what she said is that usually the inspector will send out an email within 24 hours, just kind of specifying there are load bearing beams that are damaged, or just some very straight points on things that need to be fixed, because right now you can't go into it. It says you cannot enter. It's not structurally sound.
For all three families?
I can't speak to how many families, but the building itself.
Okay.
Mhm.
Well, that's terrible because, it'd be hard pressed to find one apartment in this city, let alone three. So it's really at a really bad time. And we found the money to put folks up for a month. And unfortunately, it was a lot of folks when that Hanson Lodge closed. And I want to go out on a limb here and say 85% were folks from outside of our area, but it was the right thing to do. These are our three sets of locals, and they're just victims of a very tragic, truck incident where, if you can imagine somebody crashing through the wall of a triplex and then just leaving. They're left in the lurch with no home right now other than, a hotel room. So I sincerely hope that we will be able to help them for longer than a week.
Would
And
this
as
be
Chief-
something that we talk about on Monday night, Chuck?
Yeah, I'm hoping so, but right now I think that they only have housing through Monday. And like Chief was pointing out, due to the circumstances here, it might be difficult for the victim's advocate to come up with more finances.
Are you still thinking that what you're saying is you want council to talk about it on Monday and perhaps vote for extended housing past Monday?
Well, I do, Kate, and I'm just hoping that we have some more information by then.
I doubt that it would extend like if it was a single family home, but there might be a possibility that there's a clause in the insurance that the owner of the building carries that the insurance company may as well may assist in finding housing for him as well. I know if it was a single family home, that would be part of it. I don't know about a triplex, if he would carry that type of insurance, or if they had renter's insurance, which I highly doubt, that may be a clause in there as well. So I mean, something we should at least look at. That would be helpful for the.
Yeah,
funding
and
of all this.
I hope we have some more information on Monday. So that's something that I'm sure we'll take a look at on Monday. Andy, I believe the game plan also on Monday is to vote in the new council member after we've had our opportunity to do the interview today. And anybody have anything else? Well, I want to thank everybody for their time. It was a real good meeting. And I think we have a couple of terrific candidates to think about too that we'll discuss on Monday. So, all right. Well, thank you very much for everybody's time. Everyone have a good night. See you soon.
So, Chief, you guys be safe out there, you and your crew.